The afternoon sun burned hot over the broken streets of Rose Hill slums. The pavement was cracked. The air smelled like dust, smoke, and hunger. A small boy barefoot, dark-skinned, no older than 12, stood outside a tall black iron gate, gripping the bars with both hands. His name was Daniel Thompson. Daniel's clothes were old and too small for him. His shirt had a big rip under one sleeve. His shorts were faded and hung loose at the waist. But his eyes were clear and strong. They were the eyes of someone who had seen more pain than most grown men. Across the street, Daniel's grandmother was lying on a thin mat inside a broken wooden shack. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her breath was weak, her voice almost gone. Daniel had promised her he'd find food. He just didn't say how. Every day, Daniel had watched from the shadows as a servant from the huge mansion threw away entire plates of food, golden rice, thick meats, creamy pastas, and soft bread. It all went into a silver trash can, untouched, uneaten, wasted. The mansion belonged to Victoria Whitmore. She was once a rich and famous dancer, elegant, powerful, loved by all. But after a tragic accident 10 years ago, she was paralyzed from the waist down. Now, she lived like a queen in silence, angry, bitter, and full of sorrow. Her wheelchair rolled across the marble floors without sound. No one dared question her, not her servants, not her nurses, not even the mayor. Daniel had seen her only from afar. She wore silk robes and diamond rings. Her long blonde hair was tied back neat and high. Her eyes were cold steel blue, like frozen water, the kind of eyes that didn't blink for poor people. But Daniel had a secret, one he had carried for years. He could heal. It started when he was 6. His father had been stabbed during a fight. Everyone said he was going to die. But when Daniel touched him, the bleeding stopped, the pain left. His father lived for a little while longer. His grandmother said it was a gift from God. Others in the slum called it dark magic. They called him cursed. He stopped using it. He stopped talking about it until now. Because now Granny was sick, and there was no food, and he had seen the way. Victoria never touched her food, how her legs never moved, how her face was filled with sadness and fire at the same time. So today, he walked to her gate. The guard at the front looked at him like he was a bug. "Go away, kid." But Daniel didn't move. He gripped the bars tighter. "I have something to tell Miss Whitmore." The guard snorted. "She doesn't talk to beggars." Daniel said, louder this time, "I can help her walk again." That got attention. After a few confused calls and angry whispers inside the house, the large wooden service door opened. Out rolled Victoria Whitmore herself, dressed in a white robe, her pale face sharper than a blade. She looked down at the boy like he was something dirty on her floor. "Say that again," she said. Daniel stepped forward. His voice didn't shake. "I can cure you." Her eyes narrowed. "In exchange for what?" He swallowed hard. "Just the food you throw away." Silence. A long one. Then Victoria laughed. Not a happy laugh, but one full of ice and poison. It echoed in the stone yard like a knife bouncing off glass. "You really think I believe some Macumba from a slum kid?" She hissed. "You think I'd let you touch me, filthy and barefoot as you are?" Daniel's cheeks burned red, but he didn't move back. He didn't cry. He just looked up at her and said softly, "You have nothing to lose." Victoria leaned in. Her blue eyes stared into his brown ones. "You think you're clever, don't you know?" Daniel said, "I'm just hungry, and I know I can help." Her lips curled. "Fine. You want leftovers? Come back tonight. You'll eat what the dogs don't." She turned her chair and rolled away. The door slammed. Daniel stood still for a few seconds. The guard shoved him gently. "You heard her. Move it." He walked back across the street, his heart pounding not from fear, but from something else. Hope. Because for the first time, the door had opened. And that was enough for now. The wind picked up as the sky turned a deep orange. Nightfall crawled over the slums like a shadow. Across the street from the Whitmore mansion, Daniel sat beside his grandmother, watching her sleep. Her chest rose slowly. Each breath was a quiet battle. He held her hand gently. It felt thinner than usual, like paper. He hadn't told her what happened yet. Not fully. Just that food might be coming. She had smiled and said, "You always find a way, Danny." Then she drifted off. But Daniel's heart wasn't at peace. He could still hear the woman's cruel laughter echoing in his head. Victoria Whitmore's voice had sliced through him like a knife wrapped in gold. Cold, elegant, and sharp. Still, a door had opened, and a promise was made. As the clock hit 7 p.m., Daniel stood. The sky was turning purple now, stars blinking through the dusk. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Tonight, he would feed his grandmother, even if it was just scraps. He walked up to the mansion gate again. This time, he didn't knock. The servant waiting by the back door was already holding a clear plastic bag full of what looked like leftovers, some half-eaten bread, cold vegetables, and bones still holding bits of meat. The servant didn't speak. He just handed the bag to Daniel and shut the door. No kindness, no eye contact. Daniel didn't care. He walked back, hands shaking as he opened the bag. His nose filled with smells he hadn't felt in months. Real food, not trash, not spoiled. Food that once sat on silver plates. He knelt beside his grandmother and held the bag open. "Granny," he whispered, "I told you I'd bring something." She opened her eyes, weak, but smiling. Together, they ate slowly, like royalty with a secret banquet. Daniel didn't take much. He gave her the soft bread and pieces of meat. He sucked the soup-soaked bones clean when she fell asleep again. His stomach ached for more, but he was used to that. His heart ached louder. That night, as he sat looking out the broken window of their shack, he didn't sleep. He just stared across the street at the huge mansion lit up like a palace. He had touched people before. He had stopped pain, once even healed a broken arm, but he had never tried something as big as this. A woman with no feeling in her legs, a woman who had money, fame, but no trust in anyone. She didn't believe in magic. She didn't believe in people like him, but he believed in something else. He believed in the light, the one that lived deep inside his chest, the one that hummed in his fingertips when someone was hurting. He didn't ask for it, but it was his, and now he would use it. The next day, just before sunset, he stood at the gate again. This time, the guard looked confused. "You back again?" Daniel nodded. "Tell her I want to try." "To do what?" "Touch her legs again," the guard mocked. Laughing, "Yes," Daniel said without fear. "One more time. It'll work." The guard scratched his head and picked up the phone. After a moment, the back door opened again and she came, Victoria Whitmore, wearing a black silk robe, her long, blonde hair in a loose bun, and her face as still and proud as a queen. Her nurse rolled her chair forward, just a few feet from Daniel. Her arms were crossed, her expression unreadable. "You again," she said slowly. Daniel nodded. "I'm not asking for money. Just let me try." She tilted her head. "You know what they say about people like you." Daniel didn't answer. "They say you're all liars. That slum kids use fake miracles to get pity. You want to pity me, little boy?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I want to help you." Her eyes narrowed. "You think your dirty hands can fix what doctors couldn't. I don't know what doctors do," Daniel said, "but I know what I feel when I touch pain. It listens to me." She stared at him, silent, then laughed again, but this time, it wasn't as sharp. It was quieter, almost tired. "You're either very stupid," she said, "or very brave." Daniel didn't reply. He looked down, breathing slow, then looked up again, meeting her gaze with full strength. Both, maybe. A long silence passed. Then she spoke. "Come tomorrow. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you fail, you don't come back." Daniel smiled for the first time. 5 minutes is all I need." She turned her chair without a word and disappeared into the house. The door closed, but this time it didn't slam. The sun rose quiet and golden, but Daniel didn't sleep. He sat outside the shack, his chin resting on his knees, watching as the wind played with bits of trash along the street. His grandmother lay inside, still too weak to stand. Her soft breathing was the only sound inside their tiny home, but Daniel wasn't thinking about hunger anymore. He was thinking about that thing inside him, the thing he had tried to forget. It wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't just some warm rush when he touched someone in pain. It was real. It hummed through his fingertips, invisible but alive. Like light, like power, like something borrowed from a place he couldn't explain. The first time it happened, he was 6. His father had come home hurt badly, a fight at the docks, a knife to the ribs, blood pouring like a faucet. Daniel remembered falling beside him, screaming, his tiny hands trying to stop the red flood. And then, without knowing why, he placed both palms over the wound. His fingers tingled. His heart raced. A warmth spread from his chest to his arms. Then through his hands, the bleeding stopped. His father blinked, confused, alive. Later that night, neighbors came. Some called it a miracle. Others called it witchcraft, macumba, voodoo, slum curses. People stopped letting their kids play near Daniel. Some women spat when he passed. One man even threw a bottle at him, calling him the devil's boy. He never used the gift again. Until the night his grandmother coughed so hard she fainted. He had no medicine, no doctor, no food, only his hands. He touched her back, whispering softly, crying as his hands glowed with that same quiet power, and her cough faded, her chest eased. She slept on from that day. He only used the gift when he had no choice. Now, he was choosing. He stood from the dusty floor and wiped his face. Today, he would touch a rich woman's legs and change her life. By noon, Daniel was at the gate again. This time, the guard didn't even scowl. He just nodded and let him through. Inside the mansion, the air was cool and smelled like flowers and lemons. The floors sparkled. The paintings on the walls looked like they belonged in a museum. Everything was so clean, so quiet it hurt Daniel's eyes. Victoria was waiting in a sunroom at the back of the house. The glass walls let in beams of soft light, painting the white walls with golden streaks. She sat in her wheelchair, dressed in a cream blouse and pale trousers. Her legs were covered by a thin cashmere blanket. Her hair was brushed, her makeup light. She looked calm and curious. Her nurse stood beside her. A tray of tea sat untouched on the table. "You're on time," she said without looking up. Daniel nodded. Double quotes 5 minutes. She reminded him, "Do whatever magic you claim to have. If I feel nothing, you walk away and never return." Agreed. Daniel's voice was calm. "Yes, wash your hands first," she added, gesturing to a silver basin nearby. "I don't want slum germs on me." He obeyed. The water was cold and smelled like mint. He scrubbed thoroughly, then dried his hands on a white towel. They looked strange, his hands. Too small, too dark, too rough for this world of silk and gold. He walked toward her, stopping just in front of the chair. "Do I need to do anything?" she asked, her voice stiff. "Just breathe," Daniel whispered. His palms hovered over her knees. Victoria closed her eyes, trying to laugh, but the sound came out nervous. "Let's see what your little hands can do." Then silence. Daniel gently placed both palms over her knees, and it began. The warmth, the pulse, that quiet, humming power that came not from him but through him, like he was a doorway. And something bigger walked in behind. His heartbeat slowed, his vision blurred, but he held steady. And then a twitch. Victoria's eyes flew open. "I felt something," she whispered, "a tingling in my foot." Daniel didn't open his eyes. He kept his hands steady. The light inside him flared again. Another twitch. Her toe, her ankle. She gasped. "It's real." What are you doing?" "Just helping," he said softly. Then, suddenly, he fell back, weak. The nurse rushed forward. "He's burning up." Daniel blinked. "Dizzy." "I'm okay," he mumbled. "Just tired." Victoria looked down at her legs. She moved her foot just barely. Tears welled in her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know if they were from joy, fear, or something older, something she had locked away for years. You actually did something," she whispered. Daniel sat up, breathing heavy. "Told you." Victoria turned to her nurse. "Get him food. Now. Something warm." Daniel smiled faintly, and then she said something no one in that house ever expected her to say. "Thank you." The sun rose quiet and golden, but Daniel didn't sleep. He sat outside the shack, his chin resting on his knees, watching as the wind played with bits of trash along the street. His grandmother lay inside, still too weak to stand. Her soft breathing was the only sound inside their tiny home. But Daniel wasn't thinking about hunger anymore. He was thinking about that thing inside him, the thing he had tried to forget. It wasn't just a feeling. It wasn't just a warm rush when he touched someone in pain. It was real. It hummed through his fingertips, invisible but alive. Like light, like power, like something borrowed from a place he couldn't explain. The first time it happened, he was 6. His father had come home hurt badly, a fight at the docks, a knife to the ribs, blood pouring like a faucet. Daniel remembered falling beside him, screaming, his tiny hands trying to stop the red flood. And then, without knowing why, he placed both palms over the wound. His fingers tingled. His heart raced. A warmth spread from his chest to his arms. Then through his hands, the bleeding stopped. His father blinked, confused, alive. Later that night, neighbors came. Some called it a miracle. Others called it witchcraft, macumba, voodoo. Slum curses. People stopped letting their kids play near Daniel. Some women spat when he passed. One man even threw a bottle at him, calling him the devil's boy. He never used the gift again. Until the night his grandmother coughed so hard she fainted. He had no medicine, no doctor, no food, only his hands. He touched her back, whispering softly, crying as his hands glowed with that same quiet power, and her cough faded, her chest eased. She slept off from that day. He only used the gift when he had no choice. Now, he was choosing. He stood from the dusty floor and wiped his face. Today, he would touch a rich woman's legs and change her life. By noon, Daniel was at the gate again. This time, the guard didn't even scowl. He just nodded and let him through. Inside the mansion, the air was cool and smelled like flowers and lemons. The floor sparkled. The paintings on the walls looked like they belonged in a museum. Everything was so clean, so quiet it hurt Daniel's eyes. Victoria was waiting in the sunroom at the back of the house. The glass walls let in beams of soft light, painting the white walls with golden streaks. She sat in her wheelchair, dressed in a cream blouse and pale trousers. Her legs were covered by a thin cashmere blanket. Her hair was brushed, her makeup light. She looked calm and curious. Her nurse stood beside her. A tray of tea sat untouched on the table. "You're on time," she said without looking up. Daniel, not a double quotes 5 minutes. She reminded him, "Do whatever magic you claim to have. If I feel nothing, you walk away and never return." Agreed. Daniel's voice was calm. "Yes, wash your hands first," she added, gesturing to a silver basin nearby. "I don't want slum germs on me." He obeyed. The water was cold and smelled like mint. He scrubbed thoroughly, then dried his hands on a white towel. They looked strange, his hands. Too small, too dark, too rough for this world of silk and gold. He walked toward her, stopping just in front of the chair. "Do I need to do anything?" she asked, her voice stiff. "Just breathe," Daniel whispered. His palms hovered over her knees. Victoria closed her eyes, trying to laugh, but the sound came out nervous. "Let's see what your little hands can do." Then silence. Daniel gently placed both palms over her knees, and it began. The warmth, the pulse, that quiet, humming power that came not from him but through him, like he was a doorway. And something bigger walked in behind. His heartbeat slowed, his vision blurred, but he held steady. And then a twitch. Victoria's eyes flew open. "I felt something," she whispered, "a tingling in my foot." Daniel didn't open his eyes. He kept his hands steady. The light inside him flared again. Another twitch. Her toe, her ankle. She gasped. "It's real. What are you doing?" "Just helping," he said softly. The tray that arrived was heavier than Daniel had ever held. A maid brought it, and eyes wide with disbelief, and set it down before him like he was royalty. The plate had roasted chicken, warm rice with butter, golden cornbread, and a glass of chilled mango juice. For a moment, Daniel just stared. His hands trembled. No one in the slums ever served food like this, and definitely not to a barefoot black boy with dirt under his fingernails. But here he was, inside the mansion, with the richest food he'd ever seen because of what he'd done with his hands, because of what Victoria had felt. He looked over at her. She sat silent, hands gripping her chair's armrests, her eyes staring down at her legs like they were strangers. Her nurse hovered behind, glancing between the boy and the woman, unsure of what to say or do. Daniel ate slowly, carefully, like the food might disappear if he moved fast. After a few bites, he whispered, "Thank you." Victoria flinched, surprised. Her voice was quiet. "You're welcome." It was the first polite exchange they had, and it felt heavier than anything either of them had said before. That night, back in the slum, Daniel held his grandmother's hand and told her everything. She sat upright on her thin mattress, eyes wide and shining. She felt her legs. She breathed. Daniel nodded. "And she gave you food?" He smiled. "Real food, Granny. Not scraps. A tray, with juice and everything." She pulled him into a hug, whispering a prayer into his ear. "My boy, my precious boy. You're doing God's work." Daniel didn't feel like God. He felt tired, like something deep inside had been poured out. But he also felt full. Not from the food, but from something else. Purpose. The next afternoon, A black car pulled up to the gate near Daniel's shack. Everyone in the neighborhood froze. Children stopped playing. Old women peeked out from behind curtains. Was someone getting arrested? Was the mayor visiting? But it was none of those. The back door opened, and a tall, well-dressed man stepped out. He looked around until he spotted Daniel sitting on a crate outside his shack. "You, the boy," he called. "Miss Whitmore sent me. She wants to see you. Mouse." Dropped open. Daniel blinked. "Again," she said. "Bring him, please." Daniel looked at his grandmother. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Go on, Danny." He ran to the car. The man opened the door for him like he was someone important. When he arrived, Victoria was already waiting in her drawing room. Today, she looked different, not just in clothes, but in spirit. She wasn't wearing her robe. She wore a simple dress. Her hair was down, soft around her shoulders, and her face still pale, still proud, held something fragile now. Hope. She gestured for him to sit on the footstool in front of her. "Daniel," she said quietly, "what did you do to me?" He didn't know how to explain it. How could he? He was 12. He didn't understand the science or the mystery. He only knew what he felt. "I just shared my light," he said. She studied him. "Your light, it lives in my chest, like a little sun. When someone's hurting, I let it out." Victoria let out a long breath. "You speak like a poet. You know that." He looked down, shy. "I don't know poems. I only know pain." A silence stretched between them. Then she pulled the blanket from her legs. They were thin, pale, untouched by sun for years. She pointed. "Do it again, Daniel." Not a dot. He placed his hands on her knees, gentler this time. He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. The room fell silent, and the hum returned. That golden warmth thrust through his arms and into his fingers. It wasn't just power, it was memory. His father's laugh, his mother's voice before she died, his grandmother's stories under the stars, all of it, alive in his hands. Victoria gasped. Her left foot twitched then again. This time, it moved, a full motion. "I felt that," she cried. "It's burning, but it doesn't hurt. It's like fire and silk at the same time." Daniel didn't stop. He pressed gently on her thighs, his breath coming faster now. Sweat dripped down his temple. And then her toes curled. Her leg jerked, a full reflex. Victoria screamed, not in fear, but in joy. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears pouring down her cheeks. "I haven't moved like that in 10 years, she sobbed. "You, Daniel, what are you?" He swayed, dizzy, and nearly collapsed. The nurse rushed forward, grabbing him. "He's weak. He needs rest." Victoria knelt beside him, her knees bending, her muscles shaking, but she did it herself. She touched his forehead. "You gave me back a part of myself." Daniel looked at her through blurred eyes. "And you gave me food," he whispered, smiling. She laughed, through tears. "No, I gave you scraps. You gave me a miracle." And in that moment, with the past trembling in her bones and a poor boy's light glowing on her skin, something inside Victoria changed forever. Then, suddenly, he fell back, weak. The nurse rushed forward. "He's burning up." Daniel blinked, dizzy. "I'm okay," he mumbled. "Just tired." Victoria looked down at her legs. She moved her foot just barely. Tears welled in her eyes for a moment. She didn't know if they were from joy, fear, or something older, something she had locked away for years. You actually did something," she whispered. Daniel sat up, breathing heavy. "Told you." Victoria turned to her nurse. "Get him food. Now. Something warm." Daniel smiled faintly, and then she said something no one in that house ever expected her to say. "Thank you." The next morning, the Whitmore mansion wasn't quiet. Not anymore. There was a strange energy moving through its halls. Not fear, not panic, but wonder. A soft kind of electricity that crackled in the air like the moment just before rain died started in the kitchen. Maria, the head cook, had watched from the corner yesterday when Daniel placed his tiny hands on Victoria's knees. She hadn't said a word, but her hands had stopped moving. The soup she was stirring boiled over. She didn't notice now. As she chopped onions, she whispered to the maid beside her. She moved her leg. "I saw it. With my own eyes." "No," the maid gasped, nearly dropping a plate. "She moved," Maria repeated. "And that boy, he was glowing. Not his skin, not his clothes, but something around him." Soon the whisper spread to the drivers, the gardeners, the housekeepers. Even the old butler, who had worked in the mansion since before Daniel was born, Miss Whitmore, stood for a second, almost fell. But she stood, he said, wide-eyed, voice shaking. That boy is no street rat. He's something else. Something blessed. Victoria sat alone in the music room, facing the large window. Sunlight spilled across the piano keys. Her wheelchair sat empty behind her. For the first time in a decade, she sat in an armchair, legs folded under her, trembling but alive. She kept lifting her toes, just to feel them move. Her hands trembled each time, not from weakness but from shock, emotion, gratitude. It felt like she was waking up from a long, cruel dream. She had once danced across global stages. Paris, New York, Moscow. She had floated like wind, balanced, like light on water. But all of that ended the day her car flipped on the ice, crushing her spine. Doctors had given up. So had she. She had cursed the world for leaving her behind, thrown money at every cure, fired everyone who spoke of faith or miracles. She hated those words. They reminded her of the life she lost. But now, because of a barefoot boy with eyes like deep rivers and hands like warm fire, her legs were waking up, and she didn't know what to do with that kind of miracle. Downstairs, Daniel sat quietly at the long dining table, more polished and expensive than anything he'd ever seen. A plate sat in front of him with real silverware and a glass of fresh milk. He didn't touch it. The nurse, who had once looked at him with disgust, now placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Eat, she said kindly. You need it. Daniel nodded and picked up the spoon slowly, but his eyes weren't on the food. They were on the door, because he knew, deep down, this wasn't over. Healing someone wasn't just about the body. It was about everything: the pain, the past, the broken pieces inside a person. And Victoria Whitmore was still full of pain. He could feel it, like smoke behind her smile, like thunder behind a quiet sky. Later that afternoon, the mansion staff gathered in secret near the garden. I heard she's going to walk, one whispered. Do you think she'll go outside? Another asked, in front of the press. Don't be stupid, said the butler. She doesn't trust anyone but the boy now. You saw the way she looked at him, like he was her last chance. And he was. Every morning now, she asked for him. Every evening, she sent food home with him. Not scraps, meals packed in clean boxes with napkins and fruit and sweet buns. His grandmother hadn't tasted since her wedding day, but Daniel asked for nothing more. He didn't beg for money, didn't steal from the pantry, didn't take pictures or demand praise. He came in, bowed softly, touched her legs, and sat beside her with the stillness of a monk, a child with the soul of someone ancient. One morning, as Daniel stepped into the garden where she waited on the grass, legs covered in warm sunlight, Victoria asked the question she had been too afraid to ask. Why are you doing this, Daniel? He looked up at her, blinking in the golden light. You're not family. You don't know me. You don't even like me. I was cruel to you, she added, her voice almost shaking. Daniel nodded once. Yes, you were. She blinked. But I saw you crying. The first day, when you thought no one was watching, I saw your hands shaking. I saw your food untouched. I saw you were hurt. His voice softened. And I know what pain looks like. She swallowed hard. Daniel looked up at the tall trees. When I was little, I used to think my life was a curse. People hated it, said I was weird, said I was dangerous. Victoria listened, silent. But Granny says, when God gives you something, you don't ask why. You just use it, even if it costs you. Victoria looked down at her feet. I didn't ask to lose my legs, she whispered. Daniel nodded. And I didn't ask to heal people. But here we are. That night, Victoria tried to stand again with his help. One hand on his shoulder, one on the armrest. She rose shaking, crying, laughing through the pain. And as she stood, the house seemed to hold its breath. Maids gasped in the kitchen. The butler wiped his eyes. The gardener dropped his shears. And Daniel, he stood beside her, proud and silent. The boy from the slums. The healer. The whisper now had a name, Miracle Boy. And it was only the beginning. The world outside the Whitmore mansion had no idea what was happening behind its tall stone walls. To everyone else, Victoria Whitmore was still the cold, unreachable billionaire, the former ballet queen who had vanished from the stage and reappeared, only in whispers, hidden behind curtains and wheels. But inside the mansion, something was blooming. A boy, a pair of legs, and a miracle growing like sunlight through cracks in marble. That morning, the air smelled like rain, The clouds were thick and silver, hanging low over the city like wet blankets. Daniel stood at the front door of the mansion, wearing clean clothes for the first time in his life, a button-up shirt and jeans. The butler had quietly left for him the night before. His grandmother had kissed his forehead that morning. Her eyes were stronger now, her voice steadier. The food Victoria had sent all week had filled more than their bellies. It had filled her heart. With pride, "My Daniel," she had whispered, "the whole world will know you one day." But Daniel didn't want the world. He just wanted to keep his promise, to help a woman who had once hated him learn how to walk again. Inside, the room was quiet. Victoria sat in her wheelchair, facing a tall mirror. Her hair was brushed. Her face was soft, not hidden behind powder or pride. She looked at her reflection like she didn't recognize it. Her legs were shaking, not from fear, but from movement. Her nurse stood nearby, nervous. The staff peeked through half-open doors, and Daniel, he knelt beside her. "You ready?" he asked softly. She smiled, just a little. "Are you?" He nodded. "I think today is the day." Her hands gripped the sides of the chair. Daniel placed his palm over her knees, closed his eyes, and breathed deep. The warmth returned. That golden, silent power pulsed from him like a quiet storm. Not loud, not showy, but true. It curled through the room, lifting dust from corners, brushing across skin like wind. No one saw it, but everyone felt it. Her foot moved. Her calf tensed. And then her thigh lifted. Victoria gasped. "Stand." Daniel said gently, "You can do it now." Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared. I know." Daniel whispered, "But the fear is smaller than the light now." She looked at him, at his small hands, his steady eyes. No adult had ever spoken to her like this boy did. Not her doctors, not her priests, not even her parents. Only this barefoot child from the slums had looked her in the eyes and believed. She pushed down. Her legs shook. The nurse cried out softly, "Miss Whitmore," but Victoria kept going, and then she stood, wobbly, slow, but strong. Tears poured down her face. She covered her mouth with both hands. The nurse fell to her knees, sobbing. The door opened. The butler stepped in. Then the cook, the maid. One by one, the mansion staff gathered. No one said a word. They just watched and wept, because the woman they had rolled from room to room for 10 long years was now standing on her own feet, and standing beside her was the boy who made it happen. Later that evening, the news broke. Someone had recorded it, a maid, to move, not to share it with the world. A 1-minute video, no fancy edits, just raw truth. It showed a poor black boy placing his hands gently on the knees of a rich white woman. And then it showed her rising, crying, walking. The video exploded. Miracle boy heals billionaire. Paralyzed Victoria Whitmore stands. Aftertouch from street kid who is Daniel Thompson in less than 24 hours. The story swept across phones, TVs, and headlines like fire in a dry forest. People laughed. People cried. People argued. But no one could deny what they saw. It was real, and it was beautiful. The next morning, reporters lined up at the gates. Cameras flashed. News vans parked on sidewalks. Microphones reached over fences. But Victoria did not come out. Daniel did not speak. Inside, the two sat together in the sunroom. No words, just quiet smiles. Until finally, Victoria looked at him and said, "They want to call you a miracle worker." Daniel shrugged. "Let them call what they want. You don't want to be famous." He shook his head. "I just want to feed my granny and help the ones who hurt." She watched him, her voice trembling. "Then let me help you." Daniel looked up. And Victoria, for the first time in years, knelt beside someone not from weakness but from choice. "I want to fund a clinic," she whispered. "Not for me, for people like your grandmother, for kids like you, and I want you to be part of it." Daniel's eyes widened. "Me?" She smiled. "You taught me how to stand again, Daniel. Now I want to help others rise." And in that mansion where silence once ruled, hope bloomed louder than ever. The boy who was mocked, the woman who had fallen, together they stood,